Hi, Andrew Cuneo here with another deck tech. This time it's a historic deck, and this is going to be something a little bit different. This isn't a deck list of my own creation. This is a deck list by a user named Plasmoderic, who, if you watched my last historic video on Is It Control, I got paired against him playing this deck and got absolutely destroyed. And then I subsequently found a Reddit post where Plasmoderic was talking about having gotten to Mythic #1 with the deck, and he posted a list and his thoughts on the deck. I'll include a link to the Reddit post in the description of the video, but I thought it would be fun to look at how the deck's constructed, maybe give a couple of my thoughts on it, and then go ahead and play some matches and see how it turns out. I've always been a fan of blue-black decks in Historic. I think the combination of Narset and Thoughtseize gives you some really powerful starts. I kind of moved away from it because I thought that with the printing of Expressive Iteration and the addition of Unholy Heat to Historic, it made more sense to be blue-red, but maybe it still makes a lot of sense to be blue-black. The one thing that really caught my eye about this deck was the inclusion of this card, Svyelun of Sea and Sky, in a control deck, which normally this card is just the best card in the blue-green Merfolk deck. But I think it makes a lot of sense to play it in other decks if you think about it, because a 3/4 body, that is a pretty effective blocker against a lot of the stuff you're going to face in Historic. And then it also has the ability that when it attacks, you draw a card, so you don't even have to be getting through to draw cards. So even if you're playing against, say, Cat Oven doesn't stop the important part of this card. So I think trying this in a control deck is the thing that impressed me the most about this list, and it's the thing that I'm most excited to try. Looking at some of the other inclusions, I've got kind of typical black spells, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Cling to Dust, Bloodchief Thirst. One thing that's interesting to note, and I might not really be a fan of, is playing Fatal Push with 0 copies of Fabled Passage. There are 4 basic lands in this deck, and so you could probably play 1 or 2 Fabled Passages. There's also a Field of Ruin, which you can use to trigger Fatal Push, and I like having Field of Ruin. I think that's a good inclusion. Also, even if you can't trigger the Revolt version of Fatal Push from your lands, you do have Narsets that are going to die. You do have Shark Typhoons that will make Shark tokens that are going to die. So it's not like this list is incapable of getting Revolt, but I think that maybe you could add 1 or 2 Fatal Push, or 1 or 2 Fabled Passages if you want to make Fatal Push a little bit better. Cling to Dust, I think, is just an absolutely great black card in Historic. I honestly wouldn't mind playing more than 1 copy, but we got 1 copy here. Drowned in the Loch is a card I've never really liked that much in Historic, and I haven't tried it that much, but it does make a certain amount of sense, especially if you're going to play with all these Thoughtseizes in the main deck. That really makes Drowned in the Loch much more reliable, and it is a very, very strong card if you're enabling it. Search for Azcanta, great card. I pretty much always play this in blue decks in Historic. Definitely agree with its inclusion. For Archmage's Charms, Archmage's Charm is one of my, it would be on my list of, top 5 best cards in Historic. Absolutely great card. For Narsets, another great card in Historic. A lot of people have moved away from playing Narset, but I think especially if you're setting it up with Thoughtseize, it can be really, really punishing against a lot of decks, just the passive ability. And the card's never honestly that bad. Even if you're playing it onto a board where it's going to die immediately, you still get to activate it once and it sucks up some damage. And if you're ever getting both cards off of it, so you're getting 2 activations, it's just an absolutely great card. The sweeper of choice that Plasmoderic went with is Yahenni's Expertise, which would not be my preferred sweeper in most of the blue-black decks I have played. The thing that's a little bit different about this deck is that Yahenni's Expertise doesn't kill Svyelun, and it can also be used to put Svyelun or Narset into play. So it makes, this card is kind of a feast or famine type card. If it's good against your opponent's deck, it's going to be absolutely obscene because it's also very good at casting spells in this deck. But if you're playing against a deck that has bigger creatures, it's going to be absolutely miserable. So this is a bit of a metagame choice, or a metagame guess, I guess. One God-Eternal Kefnet, which if you read Plasmodermic's post, he said that it's kind of a pet card of his. It's also a pet card of mine. I'm actually a big fan of God-Eternal Kefnet in Historic. I think it's really a very, very powerful card. And during its time in Standard, it never really did very much, but that was because Teferi Time Raveler was legal almost the entire time. And this card just got absolutely owned by Teferi Time Raveler in every way imaginable. It was a 4-mana permanent that didn't do anything when it got put into play, so the Teferi bounce was brutal. Also, the Teferi passive meant that you could never actually trigger and use the God-Eternal Kefnet's ability, which is the main part of the card. Teferi is banned in Historic, which means that this it is a very strong card in Historic, I think. I wouldn't go crazy playing with it, but if you're already putting some creatures in your blue control deck, I think it makes a lot of sense to have God-Eternal Kefnet. Here's another one of Plasmodermic's pet cards, Ashiok Nightmare Muse. I'm less excited about this one for sure. It's not an awful card, and Plasmodermic mentions that he likes the fact that it can be used to get hard-to-answer permanents off the board in much the same way Commit can. I think there's just no way this card is ever going to perform as well as a Torrential Gearhulk. It can do a few things that Torrential Gearhulk can't do, but just on balance, Torrential Gearhulk is going to be a much, much better card, I would say. And there's plenty of good targets to hit with the Gearhulk. I'm going to go ahead and play this list the way Plasmoderic has designed it, just to see, but my inclination going into it is that Ashiok is not actually good enough. Then we've got 4 Shark Typhoons and 1 Commit. I'm a huge fan of playing Commit Memory with Narset. I think that's excellent. I think Shark Typhoon is the best card in Blue Mirrors and Historic by a lot, so having 4 of those is a great start. There are some matchups where it doesn't exactly shine, but most of those matchups are matchups where Yahenni's expertise is going to be great. So you're going to have a weak card here, but you're going to have a 9 out of 10 all-star from Yahenni's expertise. So I think that this is a good balance to have in the main deck. And obviously when sideboarding, you're going to be looking to board out one of these cards, or sometimes you don't board out all the Shark Typhoons, but one of these 2 cards is not going to be good in most matchups, and that's going to be where you'll probably start sideboarding. Looking at the rest of the lands, there's a few value lands. There's 1 Hive of the Eye Tyrant, 1 Castle Locthwain, 1 Castle Vantress, 2 Hall of Storm Giants, and 4 of the cycling Fetid Pools. That all seems good to me. I like that mix of value lands. One thing that's a little bit weird is 2 Drowned Catacombs, 2 Shipwreck Marshes. I think that probably one of these 2 is the better one to have in the deck. And then honestly, there's also 4 Clearwater Pathways. I'm not always a fan of just going crazy with the pathways in Historic. I think you can oftentimes do better. And if I was going to change this deck, one of the things I might do is just cut 2 of these for 2 Fabled Passages, and then cut the other 2 for maybe 2 more Shipwreck Marshes. Something like that. I think especially in a deck that's trying to use Archmage's Charm, putting the pathway on black in the first 3 turns of the game is just going to be kind of miserable for you. I think you'll be happier with just a comes into play tapped blue-black land in a lot of hands. Going through the sideboard, mostly the typical suspects, I would say, for a Historic sideboard. 4 Mystical Disputes. If you watch the matchup where Plasmodermic absolutely crushed me, the 4 Mystical Disputes coming in from the sideboard had a big part of that. Great card, and if you can fit it in the sideboard, obviously 4 is a great number. Negate, also a fine card. Aether Gust, another all-star Historic blue card in the sideboard. Another Cling to Dust, I like that. Grafdigger's Cage. This is one thing that is nice about not playing with Torrential Gearhulk. It means that you can use Grafdigger's Cage, so there is a little bit of tension. I don't know that it would make much sense to really just put one Torrential Gearhulk in the deck, because then you're not really going to play with Grafdigger's Cage anymore, and Grafdigger's Cage is a very strong sideboard card. If I was going to build the deck, I would probably have more Torrential Gearhulks and not have Grafdigger's Cage, but once you decide not to play Torrential Gearhulk, Grafdigger's Cage is a great inclusion. One Doomblade, which Plasmoderic makes the point of saying that they think this is the strongest Doomblade variant in Historic. I'm not sure I would agree with that. It depends on what you want the card to do for you. One of the reasons I've always shied away from Doomblade is I want a card that can kill Korvold. This sideboard's a little bit different in the way it's constructed because it has Noxious Grasp in it, which is a card that kills Korvold. It also has Aether Gust, which is another card that's good against Korvold. So maybe Doomblade is the right answer. A lot of times in my deck, I'll just play Infernal Grasp. But if you're going to have enough answers to Korvold, I could see Doomblade being the right choice. Now we get to another pet card of Plasmodemic's, and this one I really don't like at all. Thief of Sanity. I think it was a good card in its day in Standard. The problem with it is the printing of Shark Typhoon. Just, if you have this thing turn 3 and you play it and you can back it up with some discard, you don't get destroyed by Shark Typhoon. But later on in the game, if you draw it, it's always so miserable to attack when you know that your opponent has a decent shot of having Shark Typhoon. So I think that you really can do better than Thief of Sanity at this point in the sideboard. I would say that if I'd be looking at either Malevolent Hermit or Thought Distortion to include in the sideboard, depending on what matchups you specifically want to target. But I think either of those cards is good in most of the same spots that Thief of Sanity is going to be good. And then we've got one Shadow's Verdict, one Meathook Massacre. Plasmoderic does mention that they think that the matchup against food decks, because of Trail of Crumbs, is particularly bad, and I do think that that is a challenging matchup to make a deck good against in Historic. And that is, I think, one of the places where this deck suffers from having 4 Yahenni's Expertises in the main deck, because Shadow's Verdict is absolutely the sweeper you want in that matchup. And Meathook Massacre is honestly actually somewhat appealing in that matchup too. But only having one Shadow's Verdict in the 75 is going to really hold you back there. So if you wanted to make the deck better against food type decks, I would say you could probably trim Yahenni's Expertise from the main deck and start adding Shadow's Verdicts, and you would improve that matchup. That's also a matchup that is not as bad as I think most people would suspect if they haven't played with these blue control decks in Historic since the printing of Archmage's Charm. Archmage's Charm stealing the Witch's Ovens is actually a really powerful play against those decks. So I think you don't need that much help, even to beat Trail of Crumbs, once you've got Archmage's Charm and you know that your primary target is going to be, well, number 1, countering Trail of Crumbs if you get the option to do that. Number 2, stealing Witch's Ovens. And then you've got Thoughtseize to hit Trail of Crumbs a lot of the times. And those food decks, for the most part, are filled with a lot of air. If they don't get their synergies online, their deck doesn't really do anything. So if you can break up what they've got going on by just a little bit, it becomes possible to win. And honestly, the same thing goes with Narset and Commit in that matchup. It might not seem like Narset is a great card in that matchup because they don't generally draw more than one card a turn, with the exception of Korvold. But they're also pretty bad at getting Narset off the board. So you can set up Narset into Commit a fair amount of the time, and that allows you to kind of catch back up on whatever advantage they've accrued from using Trail of Crumbs for a bunch of turns. You can completely undo that by just getting a memory to resolve with a Narset in play. And if the game looks like it's going to be going long, that's always my game plan in that matchup, is to try to set up Narset plus memory. So that is the deck. I'm going to play the exact 75 that Plasmoderic used, just because I like to get, you know, some new perspectives on cards that I might not think are good. I'm happy to continue to try them and see if there's something that I was missing about the card. So let's go ahead and get into some of the games. All right, obviously no black mana, but I do have, if I draw any third land, my hand becomes functional by turn 3. I'm going to keep. It's a bit borderline. This is one of those hands where if I exactly knew the matchup I was playing, I might be tempted to mulligan. So this is an Enchantress deck, and I bricked on my land draws. Narset's really good against these Enchantress decks, so I do have that going for me. That's going to be a little bit too late, I would say. Oh, cool. This is the new version of, I don't even remember the name of it. There was one of these cards that made 4/4 flyers and cost 5 mana, but now they've got a 4/4 or a 4 mana one that makes XXs. I think we can just move on here. I'm never going to beat all this stuff now that it's resolved. Okay. Well, Negate's clearly great. Aether Gust seems appealing. This actually might be a spot where I want to have Thief of Sanity. So I definitely want to be able to get their Enchantress creatures off the board, and if they have Sterling Grove, it prevents the Fatal Push and Bloodchief's Thirst cards from working. But they do also have Destiny Spinner, which I want to get off the board. I think I'm going to trim a little bit on the sweepers. Aether Gust isn't stellar in this matchup. It can get the Sterling Grove off the board. Maybe I'll just go with that. I guess Noxious Grasp is... It isn't even actually better than Fatal Push, probably. They are a green-white deck, but gaining 1 life is kind of nothing. I guess I'm going to try it like this. Alright, this hand I'll at least get to cast a spell this game. If there's one thing that I could do for the Magic playing community, it would be to tell people to stop putting this card in their deck. I don't understand why people think it is a powerful card. I occasionally play with it, but it really is not a very good card. I think I'm just going to play Yahenni's Expertise to make sure that they don't get to like cycle through a bunch of enchantments. Alright, they have a backup. That's okay though, I have another Yahenni's Expertise. And this is one of the really strong plays that this deck is capable of, the Expertise, and then puts Svyelun into play. I'm going to do this now because of the Paladin class, and then get God-Eternal Kefnet into play. I have a reasonably fast clock at this point, which is good because in a long game I'm really going to struggle to beat Hallowed Haunting. Wow, they're going hard with the Paladin class. I'll be able to cycle this for 1, which will trigger the Kefnet. And depending on what I hit, I can also just drown in the Loch, the token that's getting double strike. They don't have any copies of Castle Ardenvale in play, which would be a target I would want to use Field of Ruin on. They do have a bunch of dual lands that have these Wolf Willow Havens on them, so I might want to get rid of one of those. Took a second, but Kefnet worked out in the end. Didn't see any real reason to change how I was sideboarding. The only real choice is what's the right mix of sweepers versus targeted removal. And the stuff I drew that game, it worked out for sure. I don't know that it would have worked out any better if it had been a different mix. Seems like an okay hand. They play an Enchantress this turn, or what, I forget what the Enchantress is even called, but if they had played one that turn, I would have been in pretty bad shape, I would say. Narset is really, really good against Enchantress's presence. Guess I'll take Thoughtseize. It helps to set up the Drown in the Lochs. I just want to land here. I think that land's good enough. It's not a blue land, but it is a land I can play this turn. Curse of Silence, Rest in Peace, Baffling End. I'll take Hollow Haunting. The Rest in Peace at least does a little bit of something because it prevents the search from flipping. I think that's not that big of a deal if they want to use their mana on that this turn. It does also make the Drown in the Lochs worse. But as we saw last game, just hitting tokens is fine a lot of the time. You have Baffling End, which hits Svyelun. That's kind of annoying. I think they're probably going to name Archmage's Charm here, or they should. Yeah. Okay. I didn't want to cast my Archmage's Charm in response just because I wanted to potentially be able to... Can I actually counter this one? I think I can counter the Destiny Spinner, but I can't counter other things once it's in play. They can't even sack the Curse of Silence because Narset's in play. Narset's such a fun card. Do I want to land this turn? I think this Narset's fine. Probably going to just play Svyelun and let them spend their mana on Baffling Ending it. Let's see what I hit off of Narset, though. Aether Gust. I guess that's better than Drowned in the Loch. So they'll be able to go Baffling and knock one off the Narset. But that's fine. Sterling Grove's a little bit obnoxious. It's kind of awkward Archmage's turn because it's going to be so expensive. Shark Typhoon, on the other hand, is looking pretty good. I might be able to win just by hardcasting the Shark Typhoon. Depending on what they do with the Sterling Grove, I might just cycle and make a 2/2. Should have a lot of information about what they're actually planning to do with their hand based on what they do here. Okay. I think the answer is they're just trying to get rid of the Narset, which is obviously fine because... Oh wait, I don't have another one in my hand. Whoops. So things are going to get a little bit harder for me at this point. This is still a very winnable game, though. That was what I needed.
My prowess is unmatched. Hone your prowess.
And the Wolf Willow Havens are starting to hatch. I do want to play in a way that makes it so they can't just attack and kill my Narset. So I'll be able to Fatal Push, and if I Fatal Push 2 creatures, I'll be able to get 2 blockers. Probably won't even attack. Yeah. That's fine. I'm not going to reveal it though. Wait, why are they attacking me and not Narset? Come on, Kefnet, something good. You can't play Planeswalkers. That doesn't count as something good. This is a spot where Ashiok is better than Torrential Gearhulk because there's a Rest in Peace in play. Alright, so I don't think that was the easiest matchup in the world for this deck, but it won on the back of Narset, I would say. Narset is great. This is what I'm talking about when I said I'm not wild about the pathways. I think I'm going to play this pathway on black here so I can Thoughtseize turn 1. But it does mean that I wouldn't be able to use an Ashiok if it came to it. This is an unusual deck. Guess I'll take the Ascendant Spirit. This thing is 1 mana hexproof, so it's just a worse version of Dive Down, I guess. Did I mess up? Was I supposed to take this Cemetery Illuminator? Oh, they don't even have a land. Alright. That's good for me. This is the 2/3 version, right? It's not the 3/1. This style of like blue flyers and cheap counters deck, I think is another deck that just gets absolutely destroyed by the existence of Shark Typhoon. Sure. Guess they're gonna get to play their tap a creature card. So it's better than it's performing better than Dive Down in this specific scenario. I think in general this card is worse than Dive Down, but they are getting a card out of it this way. Oh, I messed up. I should have... I'm going to drown in the Loch this thing. I should have done it before deciding whether or not to attack. Obviously, I can play for Spell Pierce. But if they have another give hexproof card, it's going to be pretty bad for me that I attacked with both things. This draw is not the stuff dreams are made of, but I think I'm probably going to kill them with Hollow Storm Giants before they really get much going on. Oh, they have Hollow Storm Giants of their own. But they're behind on land drops. Wait, why did they... Oh, they have an enchantment on top of their deck. But yeah, I guess they got to get it off the top of their deck. That counts for something. Are they going to play the tap a creature card? They can Spell Pierce this, and then I won't be able to activate the Hall of Storm Giants. I can also Geist Light Snare it. I'll pay. I'll pay. I'll pay. Okay. It gives me another lethal attacker. So, mono blue spirits. Mystical Dispute is obviously great, as is Doomblade. Thief of Sanity, I would say it's maybe good. Shadow's Verdict is probably too expensive, although they might have Tempest Djinn in their deck, which it would be a card that could kill Tempest Djinn. For the most part, in this matchup, you just want to make your deck cheaper. So I'm going to take out Ashiok. I think I'm going to cut Kefnet as well. I'm going to trim one Narset. It's hard to resolve. I should be assuming they're going to board in Mystical Disputes. Cling to Dust doesn't really do anything. I guess it does a little bit against that Cemetery Illuminator, but it's not a particularly strong card. I think I don't want Commit. Definitely want 4 Shark Typhoons. That's going to be kind of my top end in this matchup, which it's good top end because it's instant speed and it's uncounterable. Overall, this should be a pretty strong matchup for this deck with 4 Mystical Disputes. Slightly awkward mana this hand, but I think perfectly fine hand to keep. It's possible I'm going to want to cycle this. Hopefully they don't have a curiosity type card. Alright, it's not a curiosity. That's still not great for me, though. This is 4 extra because they have a flyer. Okay. Once I get to the point where I've managed to trade resources with them, as long as they haven't drawn any extra cards, it's generally really good for the blue-black deck because I just have more high-impact cards in my deck. They have a bunch of soft counters that eventually become bad draws. They have a bunch of like pretty low power level cards that are only good if you're comfortably ahead in the game. They have auras they can draw that... In this next particular turn, drawing Curious Obsession would actually be a pretty good draw, but eventually the game usually gets to a point where it's not a good draw at all. Seems like they're just thinking about whether or not to play the Lofty Denial, which I think they should probably play it and just hope it works, but I think they're maybe not going to. I'm obviously going to Mystical Dispute it if they choose to play it here. Finally get to go ahead and cycle this as well. So they've got a 1 a turn clock here, which is a little bit threatening, but it's not that scary. It'll be a lot it'd be a lot scarier if they can add to it this turn. Hopefully their hand is like a land, a Lofty Denial, and a Spell Pierce, or another Lofty Denial, or just another card that isn't proactive. It's possible they're just disconnected. Seems like they're disconnected. All right. I'm going to keep this hand. This is one of those hands where I don't like the pathways because of hands like this. I'm going to play it on black so that I can cast Thoughtseize and Cling to Dust, but it makes the Archmage's Charm really not very exciting. Guess I'm just going to take the Shark Typhoon. Do have Cling to Dust, which can be a real blowout against Mizzix's Mastery. Unfortunately, I think I might be forced to just cast it to make my land drops. It didn't work. I didn't make my land drops. Okay. Gives me a small amount of hope. They have Soul Seer in their main deck. Really weird, I would say. I think this is a good turn to not do anything, probably. Kind of worried that I'm just going to lose to Torrential Gear Hulk at this point. Guess they whiffed on their land. I haven't Field of Ruin them to get my third blue because I figured that they probably have Hall of Storm Giants in their deck somewhere. They have Niv and Chandra. It's not pleasant. I think Chandra is more beatable than Niv is. Just going to run this into an Archmage's Charm. I don't want them to play Archmage's Charm just to draw 2 cards. Can they Soul Seer this? I guess they must be able to. That's fine. My goal was really just to make it so that they couldn't spend 3 mana on drawing 2 cards.
I must stay focused.
Oh, they're just going hard on getting the Chandra into play. Interesting. I can commit it, but it doesn't really do anything. I guess I can commit it and then hope to draw running lands. Maybe get to pressure it with the Hall of Storm Giants. I don't think that's realistically going to happen, but I'll try. I can also Field of Ruin it away. That's probably the play I'm going to have to make. Up to 3 cards in the yard for Drowned on the Loch. Don't understand this play by the opponent at all. They just shuffled away the card that I was hoping that I was going to use my Field of Ruin to shuffle away their Chandra, but they instead just chose to do it for me.
I was not prepared for this.
That was not the card I was hoping to draw. Yahenni's Expertise number 3. Like I said when I was going over the deck, there's certainly going to be matchups where Yahenni's Expertise is not good, and this is one of them. Am I filling up my yard at least for Cling to Dust? I am. Ow. That hurt both my feelings and my life total. Not having access to 4 blue mana is really bad. I'm hoping to just somehow bluff my way through them not playing Mizzix's Mastery. If they just cast Mizzix's Mastery on Opus, or they cast it and use Archmage's Charm to defend it on Opus, I cannot win. I fell too far behind on land drops this game. But my plan of just bluffing my way through it may actually be working. They might just have another Opus in their hand, though. Archmage's Charm to draw 2 cards. Sure. Sure. Okay. You win this one, opponent. You win this one.
You want to play with fire, huh?
So the disputes are great. This is the kind of matchup Thief of Sanity is for. Like Cling. I think I'm not going to board in the Cage because I'm assuming they're going to take out some, if not all, of their Mizzix's Masteries. I definitely want Gust and Negate, obviously. But Gust is really good against their uncounterable red cards. I think those are all the sideboard cards I'm really excited about. I guess Doomblade is going to be better than Fatal Push, just because it can kill Niv. They had Planeswalkers, so I want to leave Bloodchief's Thirst in my deck, probably. Definitely don't want any Yahenni's Expertises. Fatal Push is also quite bad. I guess I'm going to take out a Kefnet. Yeah, this is... The Thief of Sanities are kind of awkward here because they're honestly... There aren't a lot of cards I don't like from what I've got here. I could take out Bloodchief's Thirst and just rely on Aether Gusting and or Thoughtseizing the Planeswalkers. It's not going to be any of those. It's not going to be any of these. I mean, I guess it could be Doomblade, but I do like having a little bit of that kind of stuff in the blue mirrors. I don't think it should be a Narset. A Dispute, a Commit, Shark Typhoon. I guess I'm just going to only have one Thief of Sanity. Because I think it's the worst card. When I said I liked having a little bit of Doomblade type stuff, it's not just because of the Niv Mizzet, it's because they're also probably going to have Shark Typhoons. And you can steal them with Archmage's Charm, but sometimes it's nice to just have an additional answer to them. Also, they probably have Hollow Storm Giants in their deck. And sometimes you want to be able to kill it, which this deck does have Drowned in the Loch that can do that, so maybe I shouldn't have Doomblade. We'll hopefully learn a little bit more about how their deck is constructed post-board this game and get to tweak things for Game 3. I'm not going to make a Shark this turn just because I saw a bunch of Prismari commands last game, and I'd like to get the Shark to be big enough to survive Prismari command, if at all possible. Against their deck, I think this is a safe turn to tap out like this. Think what's the worst that could happen? Chandra? That Chandra would have to just go down to finish the Shark off. Sure. If they have 6 mana Chandra, this is going to be ugly. Yeah, that's not that bad. Okay. That is beatable. I think I'm in real strong shape here at this point. They might decide their best play is to just attack with the Hollow Storm Giants, which would be great. I'd get to just drown in the Locket. If they have another Mystical Dispute because they made a land drop, it would no longer work, which would be unfortunate for me. I should use my mana this turn. I guess I'll just get in control of another Shark. It's a little bit risky because I'm giving up my answer to the Hall of Storm Giants. I have my own Hall of Storm Giants in play, which makes it somewhat safer to do what I just did. There are plenty of bad things that could happen to me here, but if they don't, I'm in pretty good shape. I think if they go all out on attacking me, I'll just double chump. Hope to draw an untapped land so I can commit their shark and then memory. Okay, that's a little unhealthy for me. On untapped land. Thoughtseize is not going to do what I need. Wow, that's really unfortunate. I thought I had turned the corner. I'm hoping to just bluff Drowned in the Loch to make it through this turn. Is it going to work? Oh well. I probably didn't play that matchup great. You know, the Shark Typhoon mirrors like that, they can spiral out of control so easily. And the uncounterable cards were pretty scary. I didn't draw enough Thoughtseizes when they mattered. Anyway, that's that deck. I think that my main takeaway from it is I am excited about the idea of Svyelun in a control deck. Especially, that was kind of a lower to the ground control deck where I think it really makes a lot of sense. Lower to the ground in the sense that you're playing Thoughtseize and Narset, so having another 3 mana really powerful permanent to put into play, I think makes a lot of sense with those cards in particular. So, like I said, that deck was made by Plasmoderic, who got to #1 at one point on the ladder last month. I don't think he finished #1. I think Zan did, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't really know. Anyway, I think that's a pretty cool deck to try out, and shout out to him for making it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.